Welcome back to the Princesslandia Podcast. This is episode 2 of the Princesslandia Podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Prince Aladdin, or Ali. And my co-pilot for this podcast journey is a Mr. Flynn Ryder, who is also here with me today. Flynn, how are you feeling this week?
Well, Ali, I feel pretty good. We got our first podcast under our belts, and I feel like we'll be even better moving forward. So I feel good this week. I feel good about the podcast. I feel good about everything in general. So do I, Flynn. I feel real good about everything. And we do have a podcast under that belt, and we got a lot of feedback from that first podcast. A lot of feedback. We got emails, we got letters, we got phone calls, a couple reviews. We got a lot of feedback.
Yes, we did. Most of it was very negative. Yes, very negative. Most of it was very negative. One of the biggest things was might have been a little too long. Might have been a little too long for a podcast. So we're gonna try and keep it a little shorter moving forward. Let's see. We got one complaint that we didn't take enough phone calls. But I'm not going to lie, that did look like it was in Hans's handwriting. So I'm going to dismiss that one a little bit. Mostly it was the length. Cinderella sent us an email. All it said was, tighten it up, boys. Tighten it up. So we're going to try and do that. Well, a lot of it might have been the special guests that we had too. We had a lot of special guests last week. I mean, that was a big topic, top 10 Disney villains, and we had a lot of special guests last week. So, maybe we'll cut down on that. Actually, that was one of the more positive things that we heard back from was the special guests that we had. A lot of people enjoyed the special guests. In fact, they enjoyed them a lot more than you and me. They said that we should talk less and we should have more special guests. Well, this is our podcast, so I don't see that happening. Nor do I, my friend. What else? The last thing we got a bunch of emails and letters that just said less Ron. So I guess sorry about that, Ron, but people did not enjoy your input last week, so we're gonna try and cut you out a little bit more. But Flynn and I are here, and we're gonna talk away despite the letters and emails we got. We're going to talk our way right into episode 2. Before we get started, though, Flynn, I do have a question. What is with your coffee mug this week?
What do you mean?
Well, I grabbed a coffee mug this week that matched yours from last week. I thought we'd have matching coffee mugs, and you inexplicably show up with a different, larger coffee mug. So I'm curious as to what is behind that.
Well, there's nothing nefarious behind it. I don't know. I think the coffee mug I had last week is in the dishwasher at the castle, so it wasn't available. So I just grabbed this one on the way out. It was not intentional at all. I don't know what. Is it bigger? Yeah, I guess it is a little bit bigger. It was not intentional at all, though. It's just a random occurrence.
Yeah, I'm believing you less and less each week, my friend. Yeah, a little less each week. Okay. We are going to move on to our topic for episode 2 of our podcast. And this week's topic is the 10 best sitcoms of all time. The 10 best sitcoms of all time. And Flynn, I'll say this. You could randomly ask 100 different people to name their 10 best sitcoms of all time. And I'm pretty sure you would get 100 different lists. This is just one of those topics. I mean, it all depends on who you ask.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Ali. I think you'd get 100 different lists from 100 different people. So it's one of those topics. It's fun. It's fun to talk about and discuss. But man, people have different opinions, and people are very passionate about their sitcoms. So it's a hot button issue or topic, and but it's fun. It's fun to talk about, and we're gonna have a lot of fun with it here today.
You bet we are, buddy. We're going to have a lot of fun with it, and we're going to get into it real quick here. We do have a couple caveats about the 10 best sitcoms of all time. Flynn and I are relatively, a couple of the younger princes. So unfortunately, some of the older sitcoms are not in our wheelhouse. So shows like I Love Lucy and The Honeymooners, and I think Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore had some good ones. All in the Family, even MASH. It's just a little bit before our time. So those sitcoms are not going to be on our list, and that's just because we don't know them that well. I heard they're great. I'm sure they are great, but we don't know them that well. We should probably go back and watch them, actually, but they're not going to be involved in our list today, and I hope I don't offend too many people with that information. And the other thing, number 2, was no animation. We had to separate animated sitcoms from, non-animated sitcoms. And it would have been impossible, I think. Don't you, Flynn? Well, it would have been impossible for you when we first talked about the topic. 7 of your top 10 were animated shows, so it would have been very impossible for you to come up with a proper list. So yeah, we decided to separate the 2, animated and non-animated. Yeah, 7 of my 10, that would have left 3 spots for every other sitcom, and that would not have been ideal for me. So we did separate the 2. So those are the 2 caveats. We don't have a lot of older sitcoms, and we don't have any animated sitcoms on this list. We will do a top 10 animated sitcoms eventually, but they will not be involved with today's show. So, yeah. And with that, Flynn, I think we should probably first get to our tougher omissions for this week. Obviously, this was a very tough list. There's so many great shows that we love, but we had to leave a lot off. We really did. So, Flynn, you want to start with the tougher omissions? Yeah, actually, it was really painful for me to leave a lot of these shows off the list because I really do love them. And there's a lot of great sitcoms that didn't make my list, but the first one, I guess, is King of Queens. Really, I love King of Queens. I think it's a very funny sitcom. Kevin James is great. Leah Remini is one of the great sitcom characters of all time, in my opinion. She's probably my favorite sitcom wife of all time. She's just hilarious. She cracks me up. But yeah, and then you throw in Jerry Stiller as Arthur Spooner. If we made a list of greatest secondary sitcom characters of all time, Arthur Spooner would be very high on the list. So it was a tough leave out for me, but we had to make some tough calls, and it didn't quite make the list. Yeah. Who do you think would be higher on that secondary sitcom character list, Arthur Spooner or Frank Costanza? Well, that's a very impossible question. I guess I'd say Arthur Spooner just because he was on almost every episode, and Frank Costanza was here and there. Wasn't on a whole lot, but you're talking about 2 of the greatest sitcom characters of all time. So, you can't go wrong there. So, it's a great show. It hurt me to leave it out. Yeah, I'll give you one that was painful for me to leave out. Modern Family. I really, really enjoy Modern Family. I think it's a great sitcom. Great cast of characters. Just a terrific sitcom. But it didn't make my top 10 list, and it's just one of those things. We had to make some tough cuts, and unfortunately, Modern Family did not make my cut. Flynn, you got anything else? Well, I got a couple older ones actually. Taxi was terrific. You talk about your cast right there. You got Judd Hirsch, you got Danny DeVito, you got Tony Danza, you got the guy from Back to the Future, Christopher Lloyd is his name. You got Latka, that crazy guy, that crazy old comedian. Just a great show. Marilu Henner. A terrific sitcom, but didn't quite make my list. And then the other one from that era a little bit was Newhart. I love Newhart. Bob Newhart is one of my favorite comedians. His dry humor cracks me up. Larry, Daryl, and Daryl were one of the great sitcom bits of all time, and it was hard to leave Newhart off the list too. So had to make some tough cuts. Really did. Yeah. Yeah, we did. One of the newer, or I think it's still running, cuts that did make our list was Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which we both enjoy. It's a really fun sitcom, but did not quite as near and dear to our hearts as a lot of the other sitcoms. It's just one of those things, and plus, I'm not going to lie, I really loved the first, I don't know, 4 or 5 seasons of It's Always Sunny, and then I got a little behind, and now they're on like season 37, and it's just a really daunting task to try and catch up. So I'm a little behind on that one, but I do love the sitcom. It's really good. It's like the longest running sitcom of all time, not animated, of course. But yeah, it's one of the longer shows that's ever lasted. I mean, good for them, good for them. But it didn't quite make our list. Any last thoughts on omissions? Well, I think we should both talk about the Golden Girls. We both love the Golden Girls, and it didn't make either one of our top 10 lists, but I'll tell you, those old ladies, they are just terrific, and I really love that show, but it didn't make either one of our list, which is shocking, to be honest with you, because, God, they're just so great, and Betty White's just a national treasure, or she was, but Golden Girls didn't make our list either, so I think that'll probably wrap it up for the tough omissions. There's a lot more, obviously, but those are the ones we're going to talk about. Yeah, we're going to have to move on here to our actual top 10 list, which I think we're ready for. Don't you, Flynn? Yeah, I think we're ready here. All right, well, we are going to get now to Flynn and I's list of the 10 best sitcoms of all time. So, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the list. At number 10, I have The Larry Sanders Show. The Larry Sanders Show, a very underrated sitcom, in my opinion. First of all, you got the great Gary Shandling, one of my favorite comedians of all time. Then you throw in Jeffrey Tambor and Rip Torn. And look at the rest of the cast. Janine Garofalo, Bob Odenkirk, Jeremy Piven, Jon Stewart was on like 5 or 6 shows. I mean, just a terrific cast, very funny. But for me, it all comes down to Gary Shandling. The guy cracks me up. Like even his movies, like what was that movie he did? What Planet Are You From? I love that movie. God, he just makes me laugh. So yeah, I have the Larry Sanders Show at number 10. All right. Well, that's a good start. That's a good start with the Larry Sanders Show. At my number 10, I have New Girl. I think New Girl just cracks me up, and it's the characters on that show are amazing. When you first watch the show, Schmidt pops off the screen. He just does. He's one of the great characters of all time. And then the more you watch the show, Nick Miller is one of the great characters of all time. And then you watch it even more, and Winston might be your favorite character on the show because he's terrific. And then if you ask me by the end who's my favorite character on the show, it might be Coach. I love Coach. So, I mean, just so many great characters and so funny. I have New Girl at my number 10. What about the actual New Girl? You didn't even mention her. Was it Zoe Deschanel? No, she's great. Yeah, she's great on the show. But she's like the 6th best character on the show. So the other guys are and then of course Cece. But the other characters are better, and she's great. Zoe's great, but the other characters put New Girl at my number 10. All right. Well, let's move on to number 9. At my number 9, I have Community. Terrific sitcom. It was at one time on a path that maybe it was going to be the greatest sitcom of all time, but the reason I have it at 9 and not higher is because the last few seasons were just okay, in my opinion. They weren't as good as the first 3. The last 3 seasons were good, but not as good. So I have it at number 9 because it's a great sitcom, but it could have been higher, but they struggled a little bit down the stretch. Well, I disagree with that premise, but I'll give you my number 9. My number 9 is 30 Rock. You got Tina Fey, Alec Baldwin, Jane Krakowski, Tracy Jordan, obviously, Jack McBrayer. Just unbelievable cast and unbelievably funny. Just terrific stuff. I love 30 Rock, and that's why I have it at my number 9.
All right, 30 Rock at number 9 for you. Let's get to our number 8. At my number 8, I have Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the police comedy with Andy Samberg, and such a great cast there. And I'll tell you what, Captain Holt, played of course by the great Andre Braugher, and then you throw in Stephanie Beatriz and Terry Crews and Melissa Fumero, Joe Lo Truglio. Unbelievable stuff, unbelievable sitcom, so funny, so great cast, and that's why I have it at my number 8. And yeah, that's what do you have at your number 8? Oh yeah, Brooklyn. That was a tough omission for me. I do love that show, and you're right about Holt and Peralta. But at my number 8, I have Curb Your Enthusiasm, the great Larry David show. Unscripted, apparently, like they barely have scripts. They just kind of wing it and go with it. But talk about some comedic actors. They have so many great talents on that show. Larry David himself, and then Jeff Garlin, Richard Lewis, Ted Danson. And so many guest appearances and so many great actors and actresses. And then, of course, Bob Einstein, is probably who unfortunately lost a little while ago. But Bob Einstein, as Funkhauser, one of the great sitcom characters of all time, and him and Larry are so funny together. So I love Curb, and I have it at my number 8. All right, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Okay, let's get to number 7. My number 7, I have a little bit of an older one. I grew up watching it. It's Family Ties. Family Ties with the great Alex Keaton, played by Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox, in my opinion, is one of the more underrated actors of all time. His comedic timing, his vulnerability, his everything he did was amazing. And Michael J. Fox, I think, is one of the great actors of all time, and had one of the great sitcom characters of all time, and Alex Keaton, that little young Republican. God, he was so much fun to watch. He was just great. And I have Family Ties at number 7. Oh, Family Ties. Wow, that takes me back. Well, at my number 7, I have Frasier. The great Frasier. One of the most awarded sitcoms of all time. Maybe the most awarded sitcom of all time. I haven't done the research, but I know it's one of the most awarded sitcoms of all time. But it is, it's terrific stuff. The great Kelsey Grammer as Frasier. David Hyde Pierce. The dad, what was his name? Robert something. Oh, God, he was so great. But everybody on that show is great. And then, I say Frasier is responsible for a couple of the single greatest sitcom episodes of all time. And I just love the show, and I have it at my number 7. Well, I agree with you. I have it one spot higher. I have Frasier at number 6. Like you said, I think Frasier is hilarious. I think it's one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. Obviously, it's on my list. But, and like you said, some of the greatest episodes of all time. I think the Whooping Cranes is one of my favorite episodes of television I've ever seen. It's so funny. But yeah, I have Frasier at number 6. I agree with you. It's great. I have it one spot higher. But yeah, what do you have at number 6? Well, my number 6, I have News Radio. Very underrated comedy. The late, great Phil Hartman, obviously, was a huge cog in that show, but the whole cast is amazing. You got Dave Foley, who's just phenomenal. You've got Maura Tierney, who is terrific in everything she does. You've got Stephen Root, who can do anything, absolutely anything. Comedy, drama, straight man, crazy man. Anything you ask Stephen Root to do, he will do, and he will do it well. So, just one of the great character actors of our generation. And then you've got Condi Alexander, who I love more than my own life. Sometimes I think I love her. She's phenomenal. And you've got Andy Dick and Joe Rogan, two human beings who I can't stand in any other avenue of life. But in news radio, they are terrific. They play terrific characters. They do a phenomenal job in their roles. And, I just think news radio is one of the greatest
sitcoms of all time. That's why I have it number 6. It's all led by Bill McNeil. Phil Hartman is Bill McNeil, though. I mean, one of the great sitcom characters of all time, television characters of all time, performances of all time. And yeah, News Radio is my number 6, and I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, you talk about News Radio a lot. You've always enjoyed it a little bit more than me, but I do love that show. I think it's a great show. And I will say this, Phil Hartman is not only one of my favorite actors and comedians of all time, he's one of my favorite human beings of all time. I just loved everything about him. Such a devastating loss when we lost him. So I do love that show, but I think we should probably get into our top 5. We're getting into the top 5, the best of the best for each of us right now. And at my number 5, I have Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation, in my opinion, obviously one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. I love the show. They struggled a little bit through season 1, a little awkward stage, and then they hit season 2 just running, up and running, and then as soon as Rob Lowe and Adam Scott joined the cast, they just took off. They just took off into another stratosphere, and it's one of the great sitcoms of all time, and so many great characters. Leslie Knope, Ron Swanson, Aziz, or Tom, April Ludgate, and Andy Dwyer. Just phenomenal stuff, and I have Parks and Rec at number 5. Well, I agree with everything you just said, and this is, we have a match at number 5. I also have Parks and Rec at number 5. Like you said, so many great characters. Ron Swanson's a top 5 character of all time. I love Ron Swanson. Leslie Knope is amazing. April Ludgate might be the greatest sitcom character of all time. And her and Andy, as a couple, I would say her and Andy Dwyer, April Ludgate and Andy Dwyer, are the greatest sitcom couple in the history of television. They're perfect together. They're absolutely perfect together, and they're my favorite couple of all time. And yeah, I agree with you. I also have Parks and Rec at number 5, and deservingly so, in my opinion, and in your opinion, obviously, as well. Definitely deserving, as we both agree. All right, let's get to number 4. At my number 4, I have The Office. And speaking of great relationships in sitcom history, The Office has Jim and Pam. Another one of my favorite couplings in television history. But they also have 2 of the greatest sitcom characters of all time, Michael Scott and Dwight Schrute. Just terrific, amazing. And a lot like Parks and Rec, they struggled through a slightly awkward season 1, and then, man, they hit the ground running. They just hit on all cylinders, and a great cast, great characters. Everybody hates Toby. I love that part of it. Just obviously a very iconic sitcom, one of the most famous and lovable sitcoms of all time, and that's why I have The Office at number 4. Okay, The Office at number 4. I know you love The Office. At my number 4, I have Arrested Development. Unfortunately, a somewhat short-lived sitcom. It only lasted 3 seasons in its original run. I know it got new life on Netflix, and it was still very good, but it wasn't quite the same. But the original run, one of the great sitcoms of all time, and a game changer. It changed sitcoms. It changed television. It changed how you do things. It really did. It was a groundbreaking sitcom. And you talk about characters. You got Michael Bluth. You got Joe Bluth. You got Buster Bluth. You got Lucille Bluth. Lindsay Bluth. Tobias. You've got George Sr. You've got George Michael Bluth. You've even got Egg. Or Ann. Egg or Ann. Whatever you want to call her. I mean, just so many great characters in that show. Such great comedy. And I'll say this, probably the greatest pilot in television history. I know there's a lot of good ones. Cheers had a great one. Friends had a good one. News Radio had a good one. But I don't think anything touches the pilot episode of Arrested Development. It's one of the greatest episodes of television of all time, let alone pilots. And it was their first time out. So yeah, unfortunately it didn't last as long as it should have. But Arrested Development is one of the greatest sitcoms of all time.
one of the funniest sitcoms of all time, one of the most clever sitcoms of all time, and like I said, one of the most groundbreaking sitcoms of all time. Just the way they approached how they did things. It changed television forever, and that's why I have Arrested Development as my number 4. Arrested Development at number 4. I know you love Arrested Development. You talk about it quite a bit. And I love Arrested Development too. For me, it was just a little too short. Like the initial run was not long enough, and at its best, they were elite, but it just wasn't long enough. A lot of other sitcoms had longer runs and longer seasons, so I had to leave Arrested Development out. Let's get to our number 3, though. My number 3 is Friends, The Great Friends, and I mean, one of the most iconic sitcoms of all time, one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, one of the most lovable sitcoms of all time. Just terrific cast, terrific characters, terrific episodes, some of the greatest episodes in the history of television. And perfectly cast. Every actor in those roles, they were perfect, absolutely perfect. And you mentioned the pilot, the great pilots of earlier. Friends had one of the great pilots of all time. Like, I mean, they were cooking with gas immediately. And yeah, I mean, I have Friends as my number 3 sitcom of all time, and I think it's a pretty easy choice. I think it's hard to argue my number 3 choice with Friends. I really do. It's hard to argue. Well, I can make that argument personally, but let's just get to my number 3. My number 3 is Cheers. You talk about iconic. Cheers is obviously one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. It was actually very difficult for me to put it at 3 because it could have been much higher, but Cheers, obviously, terrific sitcom, very funny, unbelievable cast of characters. I mean, you got Cliff and Norm and Woody and Coach and Rebecca and Diane and Carla and Frasier, and then obviously you've got Sam Malone. Sam Malone is one of the greatest television characters of all time, played by one of the great television actors of all time, and Ted Danson. So yeah, I have Cheers as my number 3. Yes, Cheers. I agree that Cheers is really good. It is hard to keep it at 3. Some of us might have it higher, but let's get to our number 2. We're down in the top 2, Flynn. At my number 2, I have Seinfeld. The Great Seinfeld. Obviously one of the funniest sitcoms of all time. Unapologetic about their humor. You got the Gang of 4 with Jerry, George, Kramer, and Elaine. Unbelievable characters, unbelievable chemistry too, and obviously Seinfeld. So many memorable moments, so many memorable scenes and episodes. Obviously Seinfeld is one of the greatest sitcoms of all time, and that's why I have it at my number 2. All right, can't argue with that. Well, I might later, but at my number 2, I'll tell you, I have Community. Really? Community? Yeah, I have Community. I think Community is one of the most ingenious sitcoms of all time, one of the most hilarious sitcoms of all time, and just so unique and so clever in what they did. The characters are great, the actors are great, the episodes are great, and you mentioned that their last couple seasons might not have been as good as their first couple seasons. I would argue that the last few seasons are underrated, and they were still better than anything else on television. And but the first few seasons, and I'll say this about the first few seasons, from about the end of season 2 or season 1, excuse me, through season 3, it might have been one of the greatest runs in television history. Like, every episode was elite. Every episode was unbelievable. You got the paintball episodes. You got when they throw the dice in the air and there's different outcomes for everything. You've got the chicken nuggets episode with Goodfellas. I mean, just obviously one of the most iconic sitcoms of all time. And I have Community at my number 2. Community at number 2. Okay, all right. Well, I respect that, but let's get to our number 1s. We're down to our number 1s here, Flynn. So let's get right to it. At my number 1, I have Cheers.
Cheers is my number one sitcom of all time, and you made some good points about it earlier. Obviously, the cast of characters, the episodes, the chemistry. I mean, and it just kept getting better and better and better, and it was effortless for them. It seemed at the end. And I'll tell you this about Cheers: they lost two great characters in Diane Chambers and Coach within their first 3 or 4 seasons. Coach unfortunately passed away, and Diane Chambers went on to a movie career that never quite matriculated. But they replaced him with Woody and Rebecca, and I'm not gonna lie, I prefer the Rebecca years. And Woody was along for the ride there too. As great as Diane was, and I love Coach, but the show just kept getting better and better and better. And yeah, I have Cheers as my number one. I think it was I think it's pretty obvious. As much as I love these other shows like Seinfeld and Friends, I think Cheers is clearly the number one sitcom of all time. So let's hear yours, Flynn. What do you got? What do you got in number one? Well, I think it's fairly obvious at this point. I have Seinfeld at number one. I think Seinfeld's the greatest sitcom of all time. You mentioned the Gang of Four, Jerry, George, Kramer, Elaine. They were all individually great, and in their chemistry together was just a sight to behold, and just phenomenal stuff. And like you said, so many memorable lines, so many memorable moments. They called it a water cooler sitcom because the next day at work, everybody was standing around the water cooler talking about Seinfeld. It was just a iconic TV show, and they ended at the top. They ended their run at the very top. You know, there's no beating Seinfeld, so I have Seinfeld as my number one sitcom of all time. Yeah, those are our list for the 10 best sitcoms of all time. I gotta say it though, Flynn, I have a couple big problems with your list. I respect your list, I respect you, but to not have Friends or The Office in your top 10, you're talking about two of the most iconic, most popular sitcoms of all time, and neither one of them made your top 10 list. I'm shocked at that, and how do you explain that? Well, I mean, we had to make some tough calls. It was a tough list. I mean, there were a lot of great sitcoms that didn't make the list, and I love The Office, and I love Friends, but, they just didn't quite make my top 10 is all. It wasn't anything personal. Was it Ross? Do you not like Ross? A lot of people don't like Ross. No, God no. I love Ross. I think Ross is the engine that drives that entire series, to be honest with you. I think his life is the real fuel behind that show. His relationship with Rachel there early on, his other marriages and relationships, his job. No, I think Ross is great. I think Ross is a great character. He was a little insufferable there early on, a little whiny and moany, but God, he just kept getting better and better. And when Chandler and Monica got together in the later years, Ross and Joey became a big part of the show, and they were hilarious together. I mean, the nap episode alone, the one where they take naps, and I think that's the same episode with the bridesmaid contest. It's one of the great episodes of television all time. So no, it definitely wasn't Ross. It just one of those things. A few of the characters got a little unlikable in parts. Monica at times, Chandler a little here and there, and Ross early on. As much as I love Ross, but I don't know. It didn't make my list. In The Office. Well, I mean, I enjoy The Office too. I really like The Office. Great cast, great characters. Michael and Dwight are, like you said earlier, two of the great characters in sitcom history. Jim and Pam are okay. They're no April and Andy. Jim and Pam are probably divorced in real life by now, actually, to be honest with you. I never really believed in their relationship, but I like The Office too. It just didn't make my list, and like I said, it was a tough list to make, and those two just got left off mine. I don't see why you have such a big issue with it. I mean, you left off a couple that I love, so I'm not going to give you a hard time. All right. Well, I'll take that remark. That's fine. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's go ahead and move on to this week's panel of experts. And panel of experts might be an exaggeration this week. We kind of cobbled together a panel this week. I don't know if any of them are really experts, but they were gracious enough to join us. So let's go ahead and introduce everyone to this week's panel of experts. First off, our first member on the panel is Batman. Yeah, that's right. The Batman joins us from superhero fame. Batman, it's a real honor to have you here. So thank you for joining us.
I'm Batman.
Yeah, I'm aware. I've already introduced you. What do you think of this week's topic, Batman? Are you excited to get into it?
I'm Batman.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that you're Batman. But okay, let's move on. Well, Batman, you were a part of a great sitcom like back in the '60s, a very funny TV series. So you're a good member of the panel today. What do you remember about that series?
Well, first of all, I remember it was not a sitcom. It was an action-adventure show. A lot of action, a lot of drama, a lot of high stakes back then in that show. So I don't know why you would call it a sitcom.
Well, it was really funny from what I recall, like really comical, very laughable, wasn't it, Flynn?
Well, a lot of the humor wasn't intentional. I think that's Batman's point. It wasn't supposed to be funny. It just was.
Oh, it wasn't intentional. Okay. Well, that's interesting. All right. Well, let's move on to the next members of our panel, if we would. And the next member or members of our panel are the iconic duo of Barbie and Ken. Barbie and Ken have joined us here today. And before we even get to the 10 best list, I just want to say congratulations on the success of your movie over the summer. What a cultural phenomenon that was. Just well done. Congratulations to both of you. But thank you both for being here. Barbie and Ken joining us here today.
Well, thank you, Ali, but you can really talk to us as two different people. We are individual human beings, and we're not even really together right now. We're on a bit of a break. And so it doesn't have to be Barbie and Ken, it can be Barbie and Ken.
Oh, okay. Well, I apologize for that, Barbie. I was not aware of your status, and ouch. Very ouch for you, Ken. That's a tough blow to deal with, Kenneth. It really is. It's not Kenneth. It's just Ken.
Yeah, you bet it is now. I mean, it's right now. It's just Ken. You bet. You nailed that one on the head there, buddy.
Yeah, you really did. But anyway, it's a real honor to have you both here. Barbie, are you excited about today's topic?
Yes, I am an expert in many fields, and so I feel I will have a lot to say about this topic.
Oh, okay. Well, quite the ego on you. And what about you, Ken? What do you think about today's topic?
Well, I would just like to go back real quick and say, apparently the label long-term, long-distance, low-commitment, casual girlfriend
means nothing to some people, so I just wanted to add that. Okay. Well, great afterthought from Just Ken. Hey, I'm just Ken, but I'm enough, and I'm great at doing stuff. God, that's just terrific stuff from Ken. I really did enjoy that movie, didn't you, Flynn?
Oh, yeah. I really did. That's good stuff.
All right, well, let's get to the final member of our panel. And the final member on our panel of experts is Yev Kassem, or as much of the world knows him, the Soup Nazi from Seinfeld. Yeah, the one and only Yev Kassem, the Soup Nazi. Yev, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for having me on. This is a topic that I am very passionate about. I feel like not everyone takes it as seriously as I do as an art form, and I demand greatness from my sitcoms, and it's an honor to be here. I'm very appreciative that you had me on today.
Are you gonna say the line?
Yeah, are you gonna say the line? You know the line? No, I will not be saying that line. There will be no line for you today. Oh, that was so close. That was so close to what we were looking for. All right.
Well, that's really great stuff. That is really great stuff. Thank you, everyone on our panel of experts, for joining us here today. Let's just jump right into it, if we shall. So, Barbie, let's start with you, since you're the expert on all things. What'd you think of the list Flynn and I made?
Well, I am an expert on all things, so thank you very much. But I think both lists were very good. They had a lot of great shows, but I have to side with Ali. I mean, I would have had Friends and The Office in my top 10, and Flynn, they didn't even make your list. Those are two of my favorite sitcoms of all time. And I'll tell you why. It's because of the relationships, the connections the characters had with each other. Of course, we have Ross and Rachel and their connections, but then we also have Jim and Pam and Monica and Chandler. And what I really love about those last two is that they were such great friends before that, and using that friendship, they were able to build their great relationships. And that's what I loved about those two sitcoms. It really is. I mean, that's the dream everyone wants, right?
Are you for real right now?
I'm always for real, Ken, so back off.
Unbelievable.
You're unbelievable.
All right. Well, fiery debate from Barbie and Just Ken. Not Barbie and Ken, Barbie and Just Ken.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Barbie. All right, let's move to the next member of our panel. Let's go to Batman, I guess. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, that you're Batman. But what'd you think of the list Flynn and I made? Well, I am Batman. But as far as your list go, I thought they were a good list. They weren't earth-shattering or groundbreaking by any means. They were okay. I would have had Brooklyn Nine-Nine, probably number one. Good sitcom about law and order and police work. So I enjoy those types of sitcoms. I would have had that really high. And I probably would have thrown in Cop Rock. I loved Cop Rock. Cop Rock? We're having a serious conversation here, Batman. You can't just throw out Cop Rock. I love Cop Rock. No, you can't love Cop Rock. All right, let's get to Yev. Wow. Just wow. Anyways, Yev, what'd you think of our list? I enjoyed both lists. I thought they were very good. A lot of great shows on there. I'm a little older than you gentlemen, so I would have included I Love Lucy and The Dick Van Dyke Show. I realize I grew up with those shows and you gentlemen did not, but I would have included them. I did enjoy the inclusion of News Radio. I think it's a very underrated sitcom. Terrific ensemble cast. Phil Hartman at the peak of his powers, so I did enjoy the News Radio part that you added there. Well, thank you, Yev. I agree with you. I think News Radio is one of the greatest sitcoms of all time and greatly underappreciated. So all right. Well, I think that is some great input from our panel of experts. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. It's really enjoyable. Some of it was enjoyable, at least. And just thank you very much for being here. We really enjoyed it. And all right, Flynn, I think that just about wraps things up for this episode of the podcast. Although, you know what? Let's kick it over to Ron and see what he thinks of our 10 best sitcoms of all time. We haven't talked to Ron at all. So, Ron, what did you think of our list for the 10 best sitcoms of all time? Do you want to talk to me? I thought everyone was just pounding the desk for less Ron. Less Ron is what I heard. That's what I heard earlier. Yeah, they were. They definitely were. They were definitely asking for less Ron. But, maybe that's what we'll call this little segment. We'll call it the less Ron segment. So, what'd you think? I think I hate the both of you very much. All right. Well, not great stuff from Ron today. Maybe we'll check back with Ron next week for some better takes than he had this week. We'll see. How did we do on time this week, by the way, Ron? Did we tighten it up quite a bit? No, not really. You shaved a couple minutes off of last week's podcast, but it's pretty much the same length. You basically learned nothing from last week. You guys are not very smart. All right. Thank you for that, Ron. we'll be looking for a new technical coordinator as early as tomorrow, I think. But all in all, Flynn, I think that will wrap things up from us. I've had a great time on this episode. Great topic, great conversations, decent special guest. But yeah, let's wrap things up, and I'm looking forward to next week. So I'll see you next week, Flynn. Thank you for being here with me.
Thank you, Ali. Had a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to doing it all again next week with the next list of the 10 best.
I am also looking forward to next week's list, and that is all from the Princesslandia Podcast. We will see you next week. Thank you very much.
Ooh, man. Well, that was actually a lot of fun. What are you doing right now? You want to grab some dinner or something?
Well, we're just friends.
Well, we can still get dinner.
I have plans.
Yeah, plans? What kind of plans?
Dinner plans.
With who?
A gentleman friend of mine.
A gentleman friend of yours? No, Barbie! No! Are you guys just friends?
Maybe.
Okay, well, I guess I can live with that. I can live with that.
No soup for you!
Ah, there it is. Excellent.